Good evening or good afternoon. I am recording this week in the afternoon. And I want to begin with a notable piece of information which I think is very useful to know about. Many know, some don't. But the Shulchan Aruch brings that on Chof Sivan, which is exactly 100 days before Rosh Hashanah, to the day. Means we're going to have Rosh Hashanah in another 100 days. And the Shulchan Aruch says that it's a day of fasting. Now, it doesn't mean that they were koveyed for the klal, like a regular fast day, but there are many people, tzaddikim, regular people, who fast on Chof Sivan, the 20th day, which comes out this upcoming Monday. Why Chof Sivan? Because it was in the middle of the Shechita, the terrible slaughter of Tach V'Tat. The Yidden were attacked and brutally tortured and killed in 1648 and 1649. That's called the Gezerah of Tach V'Tat. And it was a terrible day for Klal Yisrael. At that time lived a tzaddik. Many said he was the tzaddik Hador. His name was Rav Shimshon Istrapola. He lived almost 400 years ago. And they showed Rav Shimshon Zecher Tzadik V'Kodosh Levrocha Zachuso Yogen Oleinu in a dream that the reason that all of this Tach V'Tat was taking place was because of men's Averis. And there was going to be another 1 million Jews killed. This is what they told him in the dream. But they also told him that if he undertook to be tortured cruelly to death, the 1 million would not die. That would be the kapara for the 1 million. And he, of course, accepted it. These type of tzaddikim, their lives are only for Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he was, the next day, grabbed and beaten and tortured limb by limb till he died. Close the door, please. Close those two doors. Now, to show you the chashivas that was given to this day, we have a rule that we do not fast on Friday. If Purim falls out on Sunday, when do we have Tainus Esther? Not the Thursday, the Sunday, the Friday before, but we have the Thursday. Because Friday, they're not accustomed, the Chazal, to fast on any Friday. We have exceptions, like Asara B'Tevis, because it says Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh, and by the way, that's the reason that Yom Kippur pushes off Shabbos and we fast on Shabbos, because it says Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh on Yom Kippur, and it also says it by Asara B'Tevis, and therefore we do have times that it falls out on Friday and we fast. because that word be'etzem, Hayom Hazeh, says in the pasuk. And by Yom Kippur, it says it in the pasuk. But in any other day, we don't fast Friday. What's the exception? That Chof Sivan, if it falls out Friday, if you go into Shomer Shabbos, the shul on 13th Avenue and 53rd Street, you will see a massive minyan, 100 people, 150, and they lein vayachal, they fast the entire day, not at night, but they start to fast in the morning, and they fast and they break the fast with Kiddush when we sing Shalom Aleichem. Shabbos comes and we sing Shalom Aleichem, and we then break the fast. So there's only 3 days. And that shows you the Chashivas, because this is not one of the fast days that the Chachamim were koveya for Klal Yisrael to fast. But Yom Kippur we fast, can't come out on Friday, but we do fast Shabbos. Asara B'Teves, and if that would come out Shabbos, we would fast also, but our calendar does not allow it. The way we have our calendar set up, Asar B'Teves cannot fall out on Shabbos. But it could fall out on Friday, and indeed we fast. And we break our fast by Kiddush, and it's the only 3 days that Klal Yisrael says Anenu in the davening, and is noyeg like a regular fast day with Anenu, with everything, and vayachal, leaning. That shows you the chashivas, and I just wanted to share that with you, not just as a bit of history, but a practical thing, that there are people today fasting and they're leaning vayachal an hour before Shabbos. Coming to our parsha of Bahaloscha, the pasuk says that Aaron HaKohen felt bad. He was despondent. He was dejected because they just got done at the end of and Rashi says, Lama nismacha parsha zu leparsha zu, that why is the story of the 12 tribes who brought each one of them a different day, beginning Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and going for 12 days, why is that description of each and every one of the 12 linked immediately in Baloscha, the first thing, to the menorah? So it says that Aaron HaKohen was very dejected because lo hu velo shivto, not he nor his shevet were included in the bringing. In other words, there were 12 that brought, but that was because Ephraim and Menashe, each one brought a separate for their own shevet. But when it came to Levi, they didn't bring anything, and Aaron felt bad about it. So one question is asked, why does Rashi say, and the Medrash says it, lo hu velo shivto, they were not included. Shivto, it wasn't Aaron's shevet Levi, it was Moshe Rabbeinu's. But the answer, they say, is that once Moshe Rabbeinu became the leader and the head of Klal Yisrael, so to speak, he wasn't anymore the leader of Shevet Levi. He became a step higher, a Klal Yisrael leader. and it went over to Aaron. And the lahavdil elef avdolos, if someone is a governor of a state and they suddenly become president of the United States, so they are not anymore, in other words, they have a concern for the entire nation, bichlal. But to say that whatever state they're still the governor, or where they were the governor, that he's worried more about that state now that he became the president. He's worried about everybody. Moshe Rabbeinu lahavdil elef avdolos, when he became part and parcel of leadership for everyone, it moved over to Aaron. And that's why it says lohu velo shivto. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu answered. Aaron said, don't feel bad. Shalacha gedola mishelahem. Your matana is that you're going to be madlik the menorah forever. And they're only bringing a korban one time, one day, in honor of the dedication and celebration of the Mishkan. And once they did it, that was history. There was no more special korban brought by each shevet. That one time. So the Ramban asks, what do you mean yours is bigger? Aaron was told yours is bigger. You're getting to light the menorah, and that's forever. It wasn't forever. It was only to the end of Churban Bais Hamikdash. But says the Ramban, and you can look in and you'll see it yourself, that the Ramban says what he was referring to, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was alluding to, was the fact that yes, the Beis Hamikdash will be destroyed, but there will come a time, a Yom Tov Chanukah, and Chanukah will have menorahs, and from that Chanukah until Mashiach comes, Yidden will light the menorah, and the menorah will be around forever. So that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was alluding to. Don't feel bad. Your menorah is going to have the strength of time, and that they will be able to light the menorah because of this first menorah that Aaron lit as soon as the first day of the Mishkan came, and that was his matana. Now, we know that there is a pasuk right after this story with Moshe Rabbeinu and with the meat, and that it was terrible. And Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Esfa li shivim ish mizikne Yisrael. He wanted to establish Sanhedrin. So Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, gather 70 people, and I want to read you the Rashi. Because Rashi says that he said to him, Asher Yodata Kihem, that you know that they are Ziknei and that they were policemen, and then take them and come to the oil moed. And Rashi says, Oisen Sha'ata Makir, those that you recognize, pick them. Shenismanu aleim shoitrim b'Mitzrayim. that they were policemen in Mitzrayim, Jewish policemen, ba'avodas perach. They were the policemen to make sure that the people were working and not sleeping, and working and filling up the measurement, the amount of how many bricks they had to produce that day. V'hayu merachamim aleim, and these policemen had rachmanis on the Jews that they were overseeing, and umakim al yodam, that the Jews, if they didn't do the work or they didn't produce the number, they were supposed to be beaten up by these Jewish brethren. They were the police for Mitzrayim. And they had Rachmanis, says Rashi, umukim al yodam, that they were beaten up. Now the Medrash asks, and the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel talks about it, the Rambam paskins that for somebody to become one of the Sanhedrin, he had to be Bucky and this and that, and the Shas and everything. Now these were simple people who were made policemen. How did they suddenly gather them and they became Sanhedrin? These were simple people. They didn't know what a man of Sanhedrin had to know. But it says, Chazal bring, that they went, after they were picked, they went to sleep, and they woke up the next day like they had learned for 70 years, 80 years. And this was all because they had Rachmanis on their fellow Jew. What do we see from this? We see, because they were Amaratzim, and the next day they were like Gedolei Hador. They knew Shas, they knew everything. And the Rambam adds, and they had to be b'chochma b'tvuna, they had to have a very clear thinking process and understanding deeply into the issues. So suddenly there was a metamorphosis, and they were transformed into different people on the spot. And all because they were beaten. Instead of they themselves, they could have just beaten the Jews, but they didn't. They said, we're not going to beat another Jewish person. And they were beaten. And someone who stretches out his neck to be in pain, to save the pain from another Jew, he soars heavenward to the highest level and the highest madrega. Now, another thing that I want to mention to you is that it says, Esfuli, Hashem said, gather for me Shivim Ish, 70 men. But the plural for man is not Ish. That's a singular. And when it says Esfuli Shivim Ish, that it should have said Esfuli Shivim Anoshim, 70 people. So the Mefarshim are clear in their answer. Because the Medrash says that there's two places that stand out that refer to a person as Ish. One place is V'ha'ish Moshe Onav Ma'od Mikol Ha'odam. The greatest Navi, humility to an nth degree. But there's another place, a second place, that the word ish is employed, and that is when it says Hashem ish milchama, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a entity, a being of fighting when there's an inyan that's right, and it has to be stressed and underscored, whether there's people going to be killed or not being. He is straight down the line in emphasizing and underscoring the actual strength of backbone and the cementing factor of leadership, that you can't be wishy-washy. Hashem ish milchama, Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't stand for any hanky-panky or any middle-of-the-road compromising, but a full-strength emes in what the halacha is or what a person has to do. So, yes, the word ish is singular, but it's employed because it wants those two ish, v'ha'ish Moshe onav ma'od, that should be exuding, but also that the Yiddish folk, Hashem ish milchama, and that is the lasting lesson to us all, that when you have to run away from acknowledgement and covet, you should do it without any hesitation. But then there are times that you have to learn up from Hashem ish milchama, a rov that says a psak halacha b'nogea his tzibur, and there are people who are always barking and complaining, and they were against it, but he is not allowed to be detoured 1 inch from the sacred posture that he is taking for the sake of a Kiddush Hashem or paskening a halacha. And that's why the word ish is employed, to compare it to those two, that every person has to learn up. And it starts with the Sanhedrin. There's no wishy-washiness, like Hashem ish milchama, and then Hashem v'ha'ish Moshe onav ma'od, that Moshe Rabbeinu we have to learn from and be like, that there is reigning humility in what we do and how we do it. Now, in our Sedra, Moshe Rabbeinu was commanded to make 2 silver trumpets. And when they went out to war, they sounded the trumpets. It was like a statement, we are beginning war. And there were other times when he had to gather Klal Yisrael to come together. They blew the trumpets also. Now, the trumpets and 2 other things had a very rare and remarkable distinction, that they had to be chiseled out of silver. That means they didn't take the piece that you blow into or the piece that you play the actual trumpet but it had to be one piece. They took a chunk of silver and they chiseled it out to make the trumpet. And there were two other things that were required to be chiseled out. The kruvim, the cherub-like faces of the angels that were in the Kodesh and Kodesh HaKadoshim in the Bais Hamikdash, because these cherub-like figures were on top of the Aron. The Aron was gold and had a box of wood in between, but the cherubs, the kruvim, were pure silver, extending from this and this impression of the workmanship of the actual chatzotzros. But there was a third. And the third thing that they were told, oh, by the way, the chairs were not silver. The chatzotzos were silver, and the actual kruvim were gold, and it was chiseled out. And there was the menorah that had to be chiseled out completely before it was put into the Kodesh. So, and was out of gold, of course. So there were three things that had to be chiseled. And you couldn't work it with a few pieces and then cement it together. It had to be chiseled from one piece. So the Meforshim are very quick to point out to us that the reason that these three things had to be one piece and chiseled was because the chatzotzros represented the leadership. And leadership requires backbone. Now, leadership doesn't have to be 1,000 people under him or 100,000. It could be parents in a household. That's called leadership. That we have leadership in a very decisive, distinct way, that the parents have to be together and united in their decision-making process. Now, that process had to be unique, but it had to be one voice, the father and mother. The child could not go to a father and ask for something and, let's say, be turned down, than to go to the mother who may have been turned down already and went into her position and place where she lived, and that they made from the chatzotzros a single piece of silver to show consistency and constancy, that they were the same thing in unified decision making, and they didn't send different messages to the child, that the father says yes and the mother says no. And that's called unified, wonderful leadership. But the menorah represented the Torah, and that's why it was placed on the southern side of the Kodesh, because the Gemara says that wherever you find shemen, oil, which the menorah had, you have chokhmah. You want to learn well, says the Gemara, turn your head a little southward when you say Shemona Esrei, because that southwardness is going to ignite a flame that's going to help you exceed the level of your learning and the level of your feeling for Torah itself. And it can't be piece by piece. A person has to feel that I not only went and I thanked, and there had to be the totality in the uniqueness and the steadfast participation and kiyum of Kol HaTorah Kula. And when it came to the Kruvim, the Gemara describes the Kruvim as childlike faces on the Kruvim. And those children have to see, as I said before, the totality. So that is the reason that the Chatzotzros were one of the three items that were chiseled out. Perfection, totality, unification in dealing with these inyanim. Now, the end of our Sedra talks about the fact that Miriam spoke Lashon Hara about her brother, and they felt that Moshe Rabbeinu was ignoring his wife, Tzipporah, and she spoke about it to Aaron, and she paid a price. She was told to leave. She got tsaras. She had to leave the Machane, and the whole Klal Yisrael waited for her to complete the cycle of the tsaras, the 7 days, and then the Machane Yisrael, everyone continued its procession in the Midbar. So the Medrash says, why was it that the whole Klal Yisrael waited for Miriam such a long time? What schus did she have that they should wait for her? So the Medrash explains that Miriam vatesatsa vachoso meirochok ledeya mayeyosa lo, that his sister Miriam, who was only 5 years old, stood at the edge of the water to see what's going to be with her dear brother. They put him in a cradle and they put him in the reeds of the water. What's going to happen to him? She was worried. And in the schus that she stood there, that little girl, in that schus, they waited 7 days for her. Now, this story of her standing was when, as I said, 5 years old. And when was this story of the tsaras and the Lashon Hara? 80 years later. And the Mefarshim asked, many Mefarshim, why did it take 80 years if she had a schus and had to be rewarded? There could have been 100 other things that was going on for the 80 years that she could have been rewarded. Why wasn't she rewarded then? So the Mefarshim tell us was because during the 80 years, Klal Yisrael did not fully appreciate Moshe Rabbeinu. They knew he was the leader. They knew that he helped them survive this crisis and that crisis. But the level with, it was the Satmar Rebbe, Zichrono Livracha, once said that a Gabbai cannot be a chassid, a real chassid of the Rebbe. Why? Because he's there watching the Rebbe put on his shoes and get dressed, and it brings in a drop of mundane atmosphere. When you see everyday regular activity, Yidden on the outside came and saw the Rebbe once a year, saw him on Yom Kippur, saw him. But for the Gabbai, he was joking, but there was truth to that statement. And the HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted them, even though through the entire 80 years that they were with Moshe Rabbeinu, the level of appreciation was not the level that it had to be. The Mefarshim say this. There was somewhat lacking in the appreciation, and it didn't come out in its fullest flourish. So therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted them to live through 80 years with him and see his greatness and see it, but not to the fullest point. But when it came the end of the 80 years and the whole Klal Yisrael waited for Miriam, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu told them off. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, what, you dared to talk against my loyal servant? B'chol Beisi Ne'emanu, from everyone. He's the most beloved and trustworthy, and so it came out to the pinnacle, to the turret, the highest point. The appreciation that should have always been now came out because of that 80-year background and made the appreciation exude and extend to its fullest and healthiest level. Now, there is a kasha that's asked. That there's a pasuk in our Sedra that says 5 times, B'nai Yisrael. Those 2 words, B'nai Yisrael, 5 times in one pasuk. And nowhere else in the whole Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, is there a pasuk with 5 times the words B'nai Yisrael. So the Mefarshim say, and we know that it's referring to B'nai Yisrael. You don't have to repeat it 5 times. You said it once. You say it twice in the pasuk. So why was it said 5 times? So Mefarshim say to compare B'nai Yisrael to the Chamisha Chumshei Torah. That's what the Medrash says. To compare them to the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, and that there was no jealousy. That when the Chumash Bereshis was said by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then he went to the next Chumash, Shemos. Bereshis had no jealousy, and Shemos had 0 jealousy that Bereshis was before it. And the Medrash says a few examples of what the jealousies could have been. But to teach us that Klal Yisrael, there were a couple exceptions by Korach, But you're talking about 3 million people, 600,000 men, and the women and children, 3 million, and Korach was 250. It's a long way from 250 to 3 million. So the point being that there is the ability to fully appreciate and get rid of that terrible midah of jealousy. And that's why the pasuk says it 5 times. It was equal level. Now I want to touch upon the Korban Pesach. You all know that in our parsha, the tzivui of Korban Pesach, and it's one of 2 things that if you don't do it, you're chayiv koros. If someone doesn't bring the Korban Pesach, there is a very severe penalty. And the other place is if a man does not circumcise his son, he is chayiv koros every day, not once. He's chayiv koros every day that he doesn't do it. And when the boy turns 13, it's his chayiv to do it, and he's punishable when he turns 20 of koros. And interestingly, this is the mitzvah that the people who were far away or tameya that didn't do it, they came to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, Lama nigora. Why should we lose out and not have the Korban Pesach? And Moshe Rabbeinu asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he said, yeah, indeed, they're right. And a month after Pesach, when the Korban Pesach is brought, let them bring it too. Why Korban Pesach? So it says that the highest korban that could be brought to bring Klal Yisrael close, korban, karav, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is Korban Pesach. That means if any other korban had to be brought, an oila, an osham, a shlomim, and the person didn't do it, it was a lav, but it wasn't chorus. And Klal Yisrael were at a tremendous level, and they realized the benefit of the Kadeshenu V'Asienu Hashem Elokeinu as Birkas Moyadecha, that when that Korban Pesach was brought, Klal Yisrael was drenched with opportunity, with schos, at a level that no Korban could bring him to. And many of them had Ruach HaKodesh. They lived, the only Korban Pesach that was brought was the night of Pesach. And the Korban, the Yonasan Targum, Yonasan Ben Uziel says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu picked up the whole Klal Yisrael because you can't bring the Korban Pesach out of Yerushalayim, the Har HaBayis, and he brought them to the Har HaBayis, Al Kanfei Nishorim, on the wings of eagles, and after they all ate the Korban Pesach, they were brought back to Mitzrayim. And for the next 39 years, in the Midbar, they didn't bring a Korban Pesach. Too high, they brought Korbanos, but not the Korban Pesach, because you're not allowed to bring a Korban Pesach if you don't have a bris. And because there was a sakana to do a bris in the Midbar, they didn't do brisin. So they could do everything else, but they couldn't do a Korban Pesach. So the idea of understanding where to deposit their disappointment. In other words, what happens if somebody didn't put on film for a month? Or he brought his tefillin to be checked and he discovered he didn't have tefillin, they were puzzle. So were they asked to do something special to make up? No. The only mitzvah of making up the past was Korban Pesach. Because the level of Birkas Moyadecha and drenching them with that koyach of Birkas Moyadecha, so much goodness and so much came down that they chose that to be the place to step forward and say Lama Nigora, and they got their request answered positively. You're right, you have good taste, you know what the Korban Pesach means for Klal Yisrael, and if you missed it, you came forth humbly to ask, give us the second chance, that we shouldn't lose that Birkas Moyadecha. Now, I want to say to you that in Bereshis, when Hashem created the world, he said, Vayomer Elokim Yehi, whatever, Vayehi Chen. And 26 times it says Vayehi Chen. Let there be this, Vayehi Chen. Let there be that, Vayehi Chen. But by light, by or, it doesn't say that. It says Vayomer Elokim Yehi or, Vayehi or. It doesn't say Chen. And the Zohar HaKadosh asks, why doesn't it say Vayehi Chen like everything else? And the Zohar HaKadosh says Mishum delo hava chen, because everything else remained in the world, the trees, the grass, the oceans, the sky, exactly as it was made in the 6 days of creation, the Sheshes Yemei Bereshis. But the or, after Adam Arishon did what he did and ate from the Eitz Hadas, it was taken away, and the light that we have outside is a substitute, a much darker one. And when Mashiach will come, it's like you go into a room with dim lights, and then you suddenly push the button and all the lights go on. Then you see the light. And when Mashiach will come, the lights of the world will go on. Meantime, we have light, but it's no comparison to that light. But Aaron HaKohen was very unhappy that Klal Yisrael could not benefit and enjoy the light right then. So when he lit the menorah, the pasuk says, Vayaz Cain Aharon, and Aaron did so. That's the Cain. Vayaz Cain, Vayehi Cain, he brought it down, that in his menorah was that or that became the or agonus that was taken away and put away until Mashiach comes. In his flame, and that Ramban that I quoted to you just before also talks about the fact that Vayehi Chen, that in that light that remained for the 410 years of the first Bais Hamikdash and the 420 of the second Bais Hamikdash, and the 479 years of the Mishkan until the first Bais Hamikdash was built, but then it was destroyed. It was brought back in Hanukkah, and that's why we have to sit and look at the light. I always say to you, Shabbos candles you don't have to stare at. But the just one moment. I'm done in 3 minutes. This one. Oh, go ahead. That Aaron worked out that not only in his menorah, says the Ramban, but in the menorahs of Klal Yisrael, when they light a menorah because of Hanukkah, and they'll light it until Mashiach comes. And that's the reason that it was forever. Shalacha Gedola Mishal Lohem. He brought back the Cain, Vayas Cain Aharon, that his children, grandchildren, and great, all the way down are going to at least once a year, the 8 nights of Hanukkah, benefit from that light that is brought into the menorah on Hanukkah. And we should see that light quickly and very soon for Gans Klal Yisrael to reap the benefit and to be included under the umbrella of that Or HaGanuz as it lights up the entire world.